Hello culture hashers and culture hashettes. Welcome to a new review. Welcome to a new loud shirt. Today we're going to talk about the new album from Flying Lotus, Flamagra. Flamagra? I don't really know how to say it, he's just made up this word. Flamagra. An album from Flying Lotus. Flying Lotus, aka FlyLo, is an experimental electronic producer. Flying Lotus's style is based around the bedrock of hip-hop, but he incorporates a lot of styles including R&B, funk, jazz, and electronic music. Most of the fun of FlyLo albums is listening to him combine some of these wonky effects and merge different genres together in interesting and inventive ways. He's also influenced by experimental hip-hop producers like Madlib and J Dilla. Flamagra is the 6th studio album from Flying Lotus and comes 5 years after his previous project, You're Dead. You're Dead was a breakout project for Flying Lotus and brought him a lot more success in the mainstream. This album was centered around the concept of death, with different songs exploring these areas, and there were some nice moments on here, with the standout track being Never Catch Me featuring Kendrick Lamar. This track incorporated drum and bass, electronic music, and hip-hop all together, really experimental. A very enjoyable track and notable for a great Kendrick Lamar verse on here. Flamagra sees Flying Lotus and Thundercat work very closely together, and the two contribute to a lot of tracks on this album. Thundercat's most notable contribution to this album are his gorgeous vocals on the track The Climb. It feels closer to Thundercat's R&B style than Flying Lotus's experimental electro jazz, and the instrumental even has some Isley Brothers style strings in there. This jazz and funk fusion that Flying Lotus employs is really interesting, and naturally, funk legend George Clinton adds some vocals to the track Burning Down the House. I love George Clinton's vocals on here, and I especially love the massive hand claps that serve as percussion on this track. This feels like classic George Clinton, just freestyling his vocals, singing what feels good to him, and it works brilliantly on Burning Down the House. Flying Lotus really brings out the best of his guests on this album. He gets Denzel Curry in for Black Balloon's Reprise, which serves as a sequel to the original Black Balloon track off Denzel Curry's most recent album, Taboo. On this reprise version, Denzel Curry's lyrics have more of a political edge to them than on the original track. This gives the track a bit more urgency than the original version and really suits the themes of Flamagra well. This album is loosely based around the concept of fire and the general creative process. This theme is heard most clearly on the track Fire Is Coming, a track which features American filmmaker and creator of Twin Peaks, David Lynch. It's unique to hear David Lynch on an album, and he performs a compelling spoken word. Flying Lotus puts some interesting effects on Lynch's vocals and uses some old school sound effects to really give this like a 1950s feel. I feel like this track is very heavily influenced by the Madlib in the album and the work of Madlib in general. The spoken word just deals with this fire that's about to hit a town and how everyone reacts to it. Some people dance, some people run away, and the outro's got some groovy drums while David Lynch's vocals repeat, "Fire's coming, fire's coming." This track works quite nicely and sets up the theme at about the halfway point of the album. Tierra Whack probably has the best guest verse on this album on the track Yellow Belly. She spits over quite an electronic beat, and FlyLo puts some really interesting effects on her vocals and gives Tierra's vocals a bit of a dreamlike, distorted quality to them. Like most Flying Lotus albums, Flamagra is primarily instrumental, and there are some great moments on here, like the synths on All Spies and the inventive jazz funk of Tekashi. Tekashi feels really janky, wonky, fast-paced, and it's got invigorating percussion to give it a real urgent feel. Andromeda is another great track and is inspired by rock. It's got a mournful, overpowering guitar that serves as the centre of this instrumentation, but this is supported by some soft, jazz-inspired drums that really make this an interesting fusion of these two styles. I love Flying Lotus's experimentation in putting some of these different sounds together on Flamagra. The lead single, More, featuring Anderson Paak, is probably one of the most conventional tracks on this album, but despite being more conventional, it's one of the high points on the album. Anderson Paak is doing what he does best. He raps a bit, he sings a bit, and I really enjoyed his shout out to They Reminisce Over You. I love the guitars and the drums on More, and it's got a suitably trippy music video. Flying Lotus's Flamagra is an enjoyable project. I like his experimentation with jazz and funk tropes. Not two genres you would necessarily put together, but it works very well. I especially like when there's typical funk production and underneath Flying Lotus just put some tinkling jazz drums. Not a combination I think works every single time, and I think there are a few too many tracks on this album, but for the most part, Flamagra is very enjoyable. This is a chilled out project that is fun throughout. You can listen to the whole thing without skipping any tracks and mostly enjoy it. And there's a relaxed, chilled vibe that Flying Lotus does well to keep consistent throughout the project. I enjoyed this one, so for me, Flying Lotus, Flamagra is worthy of 7 out of 10.